What's up? This is Brandon Smitley, BrandonSmitley.com. Got a question on my YouTube about a week or two ago. Just been busy. I'm going to get to it. Came from the Doubtfire. He asks, how do I train my shoulders? My first recommendation would be to go to my training log over on Elitefts and look at my training in general, and I can give you exactly what I'm doing. Sets, reps, weights on main movement, videos. If you follow my YouTube, it's all on there already. So that's how I train them. You can easily find it out. Now, what you were trying to ask was, how do I train my shoulders for powerlifting? Now, training the shoulders for powerlifting versus bodybuilding versus strongman is all going to change, and I can't really give a good detailed explanation on the strongman aspect as I don't compete in strongman. But regarding the powerlifting and bodybuilding, I originally started out doing bodybuilding-like training. So I believe that my shoulder development mainly came from doing those bodybuilding exercises, really having more of a shoulder delt day, if you will, especially in the early goings. I thought that body part splits were really the best way to go, and I don't really believe that so much now, looking at a beginner to intermediate lifter. Being a powerlifter, though, the shoulders are not a primary focus, but they do play a vital role in bench pressing. Now, how the shoulders are trained is completely different. Bodybuilder is going to really work on time under tension, really focusing on the lateral part of the delt and bringing up the rear delt and making sure the front delt doesn't overpower the side and the rear to make the delt not look as shaped. So it also comes into playing with your tricep and bicep and making sure that those aren't overpowering your shoulders, making your shoulders look smaller. Now, if it comes to powerlifting, what I'm looking for delt-wise is overall general health of my shoulder, and is my shoulder strong enough to be able to let me handle the loads that I want to bench press. So if I want to bench press 300 pounds, I have to have shoulders with the strength and size to be able to handle 300 pounds in the hole, mid-range, lockout, and unrack. With powerlifting, the rear delt is really focused on for general health and balance. Big upper backs are contributed very largely to good bench presses. You will very rarely see a skinny person with a small back have a huge bench press. They may have a moderate bench press due to maybe tricep size, but that doesn't mean that they're going to have a huge bench press because they don't have a back to press from through the bench. Now, if I was going to say how to train them to get a little bit of both, I really like Dave Tate's approach, especially well more as of recently. They need to train your movements like a powerlifter, whether that be bench press, squatting, deadlifting, whatever. Those need to be hard. You need to train the movements, not the muscles. Then, when it comes to accessory type work, you need to train the muscle, not the movement. So what I mean by that is, if you're doing delts, in this case, if you're doing front raises, front raises better have a reason to be in your program. If they carry over to your bench press goes up when you do front raises with dumbbells or barbell, whatever, then that's a reason to have it in there. If it doesn't help your bench press, don't waste your time and energy on front raises. Find the delt exercise that carries over best for you. So for me, I know if I'm going into a meet, I'm going to press Arnold presses the last month of prep really hard. The rotation, the way the front delt kicks in, and just the overall general movement carries over well to my bench press. It's going to take some experimenting to find out what works best for you, but everyone's got certain things that work well regarding certain lifts. Now, if you're looking for just general shoulder building exercises, there's the regular staples. You should be overhead pressing, granted if you have the mobility and the shoulder clearance to be able to overhead press. Now if you don't have that, maybe you can look into things like a Swiss bar or neutral grip dumbbell overhead pressing that tends to alleviate some pain. If you can't overhead press at all, then you're going to have to do a ton of isolation work if you want to just specifically focus on the delt. A lot of side raises, rear delt raises, front raises. Really make sure you work your external rotation as well for just general shoulder health. But the number one thing I think that's helped build my shoulders more than anything else is pushing and pulling heavy consistently week in, week out, years and years over time. Just bench pressing alone is very front delt dominant, at least when you're looking at the delt. Overhead pressing is the exact same way. Rowing or lat pull downs is very rear delt, upper back based. That helps build the rear delts, and then you got things like face pulls, pull aparts, rear delt flies, side laterals, hanging side laterals. I mean, the list can really go on, but trying to interbreed that you just want big shoulders and just isolating your shoulders and hitting them 2 times a week isn't really going to cut it, because you're going to find yourself just running into walls a lot. Because there's only so, sadly, when it comes to delts, there's really a limitation compared to other exercises. If you're wanting to bring up your triceps, I could probably name 20, 30 tricep exercises off the top of my head, but I can't really do that with delt exercises because of the way the shoulder trains. It basically just abducts the shoulder, and then depending on which plane, same way, you got extension and flexion. So, I mean, you do have to get creative. Now, I will say that what I did with the bodybuilding has certainly helped, and I still train my delts kind of like a bodybuilder because I don't need incredibly strong delts like, say, a strongman competitor who has actually overhead events. So they've got log and axle, either for reps or max, jerk, different medleys, the way they have to pick things up and raise stones. Their shoulder development is much more important to performance, again, rather than looks. But that doesn't mean they have small delts. But they're also training their shoulders with pretty heavy loads consistently. And then you'll find when they do shoulder work, it's probably more of a prehab more than anything else to keep their shoulders healthy. Same thing with powerlifters to the most extent, except we don't have an overhead event, we just have bench pressing. So our main front shoulder work comes from bench pressing, and then everything else is just to complement the bench press and make sure that we stay balanced and we don't develop any specific weak points around the shoulder per se. Usually a lot of issues people think it's off their chest. Really it comes down to technique and tricep work and setup. I mean, saying you're weak off the chest could be a ton of different things, but usually the front delt is hardly ever underdeveloped because the way we sit, slouch, and everyone likes to bench press when they first get to weight training. So my first suggestion would be do more rows, and if you're already pressing, keep pressing. If you can't overhead press, find an alternate or a variation that will let you overhead press, so like a neutral grip option. If that's still not an option, then you really need to work on some dumbbell and isolation work, probably a little bit more frequently to get that stimulus in. When it comes to isolation movements, there's no reason to go balls out heavy. It's not going to do anything for you really in the long term other than destroy your shoulder. When I'm doing side laterals, we're looking at 15, 20 pounds, really focusing on good contractions, or doing really high rep sets to get a ton of volume and blood flow into the area. It's not a maximal effort movement where we're doing sixes on lateral raises. That's absolutely ridiculous. So find a good balance. If you're competing in powerlifting, again, this is a preventative measure. It's a supplemental aspect and accessory work to your bench press training. If you have another discipline, that changes. If you're bodybuilding, you may want to try to find a way to throw your shoulders in with another body part, say chest or back. That way you do get some development in along with another body part. But if you're bodybuilding, you're probably getting a lot of front and rear delt work just from rows and pressing, like I've already mentioned. So throwing the delts work in, you don't need a ton of volume and sets to simulate growth, maybe except for more so the lateral aspect than anything else because of the pushing and pulling is hitting the front and rear. That's really all I can break down on the delt work and what I do, the way I look at it, at least from a bodybuilding and powerlifting perspective, considering I don't do competitive bodybuilding anymore. So, take-home points: train your shoulders like a bodybuilder, especially if you're a powerlifter, and if you're a bodybuilder, still train your shoulders like a bodybuilder.